Okay, in this video, we are going to talk about the things that you see here. This is a cartoon I found by some Arabic publication. You can see that's written in Arabic there. On the economic summit, okay, this is very funny because you have Benjamin Netanyahu in a car, of course, Israel, but you can see we've added some other things here. We can see that the events and things in Revelation are being fulfilled right before our eyes, guys. Okay? But, okay, we have to compare Scripture with Scripture in order to interpret these things. So, what do we have? We'll see that we're talking about the third temple. We're going to talk about the drunk nations, the harlot singing as a song. After what? After 70 years. We're going to talk about Tyre. Who is Tyre? What is Tyre? And who are the merchants or kings of the earth funding the third temple? Now, in order for us to understand some of the things we've already said, we have to go back. I'm going to mention it briefly to you in the notes where we've looked at how clearly Revelation 18 is describing the third temple. Now, we've shown you in a previous video, and we're going to mention it real quick, how we have seen before the inventory, the material components listed in Revelation 18, verses 12 and 13. These are the material components of the third temple. Okay? So we can see them all listed here, and we can see in the first temple in Solomon, all the same things are listed. Now, when we did that, we also observed that the same material components for building the third temple are also in Ezekiel chapter 27. So it lists all the same things that are listed in Revelation 18. So guys, this may have different conclusions than you have seen on interpreting Scripture, but it says, Daniel, these things will be sealed until the times of the end. So there are things that you will see that were maybe different interpretations of what you thought, but you will clearly see we are taking Scripture and letting Scripture interpret Scripture. So we have red, Revelation 18. We have purple. This is in 1 Chronicles. And we have Ezekiel 27. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to apply the same principle of what we can see here to Revelation 18 as it relates to the merchants and the nations that are drunk. Okay, and we can find within that certain things that are coded, certain things that are very, very important for us to understand. Okay, so we saw in that picture, in that graphic, all the nations. We saw the wine glass, right? All the nations drunk with the wine of what? The fornication of the harlot. The kings of the earth and the merchants of the earth. Now, who is that? Who are these people? Who are these nations? Who are these kings? Who are these merchants? Well, we can, obviously you can get ahead. You can see that they're all listed right here in Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah says, drink of this cup of the nations. Okay? And we showed you before that in Ezekiel 27, the merchant nations, the word merchant is used 14 times, and you can see all these nations listed. Well, they're clearly the ones building the material components to build a third temple. Now, let's take a look at some other details here in Revelation 18. We can see Revelation 18, verse 21. It says some interesting things. The voice of harpers, the voice of musicians, will be heard no more. The sound of the millstone and the light of the candle. The voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride will be heard no more. Now, guys, these are our codes. These are things that if you try to interpret them by private interpretation. What that means is if you just try to read Revelation and try to understand it, you will not understand it. What you must do is have multiple witnesses, at least 2 witnesses. And in this case, we are taking that right there, Revelation 18:21, and the verbiage there. And what does this mean? What other information can we find? Well, we can find it when we compare it to Jeremiah chapter 25. Okay, Jeremiah 25 verse 10 says, "Take away the voice of myrrh, of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstone, and the light of the candle." So we have clearly these 2 verses almost identical to each other, telling us they're the same thing. Telling us that there's information here in Jeremiah that will contribute to what's being described in Revelation 18. Now, what is this voice of harpers? You can see in that I put a harp. Well, guys, the Sanhedrin held a concert last year of the nations, and they invited the 70 nations. Okay, they held this concert. They had the priests. The priests were there. Some of the temple vessels were there, and they held this concert. Now, they held this concert last year in September, okay? And why am I bringing that up? Why is that significant? Why is it 70 nations? Well, you can see, if we go back to Jeremiah 25, verse 10, it talks about even the harp, okay? But in verse 12, it says, when 70 years are finished. So last year, at the time of this concert, Israel celebrated its 70th year. Okay, and that's when it's 2018, that's when they did it. Okay, well, it's telling us something here in Jeremiah 25:12, when 70 years are finished. Okay, that's when this prophecy would happen, that we see in verse 10, verse 12, and verse 15. So, when the 7 years are finished, verse 15, the wine of his fury, he says, cause whom I send to drink it. Then in Jeremiah 25, it lists the nations that drink of the cup, that drink of the wine. Okay? I'm not going to read them all, but if we look closely, what we can see is many of them are part of the economic summit. Okay, so if you are following prophecy or following the peace deal, you will know that Jared Kushner went to Bahrain in the end of June and presented the economic portion of the peace deal. It was called an economic summit. Okay, and if we look at these nations, we can see that some of them were there. Okay, now Israeli government officials weren't there, but business people were there. So you can see Jerusalem, Judah. You can see Egypt represented. Even there were Palestinians that are there. These are places in Palestinian territory, West Bank and in Gaza. Okay, they were there. Now the government, Palestinian government wasn't there. They were protesting. The people were upset about this whole thing, of course. But there were actual people there that were business people that were Palestinians. Okay, so we have business people from Israel, business people from Egypt, business people from Palestine, and you can see here Edom, Moab, Ammon, Jordan. Even Jordan sent government officials to this economic summit. You can see all these nations are represented. Now you can see Tyre. Tyre is in Lebanon. Okay, but in this video, guys, I don't want you to focus so much as Tyre and focus on a physical location. Tyre is like a more of a prophecy in itself. So yes, it's in Lebanon. It exists to this day. But Tyre, you're going to see significant prophecy related to it that's not any physical place. Okay? So don't get so hung up on Tyre being a physical place. However, it is part of this economic summit. As is, you can see right here, Arabia. So that's who all these nations were that are in this economic summit. They're gathering together. And it said after 70 years, these nations will be drinking this cup. All right? Now, we have these 70 years also mentioned here in Isaiah. After 70 years, Tyre will sing as a harlot. Take up a harp in the city and make a sweet melody. Okay, so in this prophecy here, Isaiah 23, it's amazing. But what it's saying, it says the harlot will sing. Well, we saw that. Okay, the voice of harpers and musicians in Revelation 18, Jeremiah. And remember, Jeremiah said what? When 70 years are finished. And this is the same thing. After 70 years, Tyre will sing as a harlot and take up a harp in the city. Verse 17, we have a repeat. After 70 years, Tyre will commit fornication with all the kingdoms or kings of the world. So this is just like we saw here. All the nations were drunk with the wine of the fornication. Okay, the harlot. Well, we have the same prophecy being fulfilled. So we have this harlot coming up, this Tyre coming up, singing as a harlot. Now, guys, there certainly is a much broader scope of what's going on in this prophecy, but we just want to narrow our focus onto a few areas. So what do we have? We have after 70 years. After 70 years, we should be looking for something. We should be looking for, certain things that happen. Well, we have it. We have the Sanhedrin concert. Okay, we have that taking place, and we have the nations drunk. All right. Now, some of these nations, guys, we'll look and see. We'll wait to see what happens with this peace deal. But many of them in Egypt, in Jordan, and in Lebanon, they're getting substantial money from this in order to receive Palestinians, build infrastructure, various things. Okay, so that's why the business people are going. Okay, but there's a possibility of different things happening, like land swap. So let's watch and see. But what I want you to understand is that this economic summit is a fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, these are the drunk nations. Okay, and the whole point of the peace deal, you may not realize this, is the third temple. We showed you that already. That in Ezekiel, all these merchants, what are they doing? They're bringing all the material components for the third temple. All right. So within the peace deal, or within whatever happens, okay, we'll just watch what happens. But there is things about the ownership of the Temple Mount and who will administrate that. That might change. Okay, that might be in that deal. But we can see that there's a prophecy. There are things that we should be looking for after 70 years. Now, you can see here we have also the ships of Tarshish shall sing in the market. So we have this singing harlot. Okay, so that brings us now to Ezekiel 27. I encourage you to get these notes. You can see I've kind of color-coded them for you so you can follow. Jeremiah 25 and the drunk nations are in red. Ezekiel and the merchants nation are in blue. Okay, for time's sake, we're not going to go through all of these. I think there's almost 40 of them. But Ezekiel 27 verse 2 brings us back to Tyre. Remember, Isaiah 23 said, after 70 years, Tyre will sing. Well, Tyre in Ezekiel 27 is the lead nation of the merchants. It says, Tyre dwells in the entry of the sea, the merchant of the people. In Ezekiel 27, the word merchant is used 14 times. Very, very significant. Okay? And Tyre is the lead nation, the first nation listed. Now, let's go back to Revelation 18, and then we can also see the same merchants. Revelation 18:23. We can see that these merchants were the great men of the earth, and by sorceries were the nations deceived. Okay? And that's what's happening. The people are drunk with money, drunk with the billions that are flowing and that are moving. Okay? Now, these merchants are described as on the ships. Okay? Revelation 18:17. Every shipmaster and all the ships and the sailors that trade by the sea. They stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas! And they cast dust on their heads. So we have these merchants. Now, who are they? Well, they're clearly the merchants of Ezekiel 27 And you can see here, get all this on the screen. We have the same prophecy. Guys, you cannot confuse this. Just like we saw, we have a perfect match. Revelation 18, Jeremiah 25. We have Revelation 18 and Ezekiel 27. Again, the cry of the shipmaster, those that handle the oar, the mariners, those of the sea, the ships that will cause their voice to be heard. They will cry bitterly and cast dust on their heads and wallow in their ashes. So this clearly in Ezekiel 27 is describing the merchants of Revelation 18. And you might say, all right, well, that's a great match, Leland. What's the point? Well, the point is that we have other things in this prophecy that would show us more things that we would, prophecy that we would see. There's more detail, there's more verses, there's more information that we can find in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel. Okay? Now, Ezekiel 27:17, you'll notice in the picture, they had oil. One of the guys was pumping oil in the car, right? Well, it says that, Ezekiel 27, verse 17, they traded oil in the market. Okay, so these are the, predominantly, the drunk nations, or those funding even the building of the third temple. They're Arab nations. Okay, you can see that, Arabia. So, okay, the next thing this leads to, guys, I'm going to have to do more videos on this because there's a lot of other content, okay, to fill in some gaps of prophecy. But I'll leave you with this. With this economic summit, right, and this whole thing, you can see the drunk nation, you can see everything happening, right? Well, Ezekiel 27 lists all the nations and all of them bringing the material components and everything. Well, Ezekiel 28 talks about the prince of Tyre. And it also talks about the king of Tyre. So what are we watching? We're watching for, who is doing what? Who does this? This peace deal is not over, guys. So what is this? I'm not saying I know everything. We'll go through the prophecy and read it. But we'll look and we'll see Ezekiel 28 says the prince of Tyre. Maybe that's Jared Kushner. Let's see. Now, I know a lot of people say who's the Antichrist and all this, but there's other details of the prophecy that we would have to find out more. Probably everyone watching this, everything you're hearing is new. I mean, you know about the peace deal, you know about all that, but you probably don't know about this. You probably don't know about the 70 years in Jeremiah, Isaiah 23, and the merchants of Ezekiel 27. So guys, thanks for watching. We're going to have a series on this, okay? So I will have other videos, okay? But yeah, let's go back to our cartoon. All right, here we go, guys. So again, Revelation 18. We clearly have before our eyes the prophecies being fulfilled, okay? We can see who are the drunk nations, drunk in the wine. We can see after, 70 years, the harlot will sing the harp, right? You can see the merchants, they traded the oil. We can see the lead nation. After 70 years, Tyre will sing as a harlot. Okay? And we have the kings of the earth and the merchants. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Israel, more specifically Jerusalem. We're talking about the third temple. So if you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to watch the previous video we showed you the notes on. And I will have more on this. So thank you for watching. And as we say, watch and pray that you be counted worthy to escape all these things. Amen.